The American Revolution that began on July 4th, 1776, was the opening salvo against the totalitarian state that was the only form of central government known to man at the time. The Americans who risked their lives to establish freedom from the crown were declaring the natural rights of man for the first time. Isn't that so? Well, not exactly. In fact, members of the English Whig Party were already in full revolt from their monarchy nearly a century before America's Declaration of Independence. The Whigs forced William of Orange and Mary II to sign the English Declaration of Rights in 1689 in a deal that allowed William to take the throne. This document was one of the forerunners to the American Bill of Rights. The Whigs counted among their numbers some of the greatest philosophers of their time, such as John Locke, Adam Smith, and Thomas Paine. These radical Whigs would have a tremendous influence on the American and French revolutions, and while the French Revolution began in earnest over a decade after the start of America's Revolution, the French Revolution was far more influential in the establishment of democracies and republics and the decline of theocracies and monarchies in Europe, the world center of power and culture at that time. During the 17th and 18th centuries, powerful monarchies such as Louis XIV of France and Frederick William of Prussia seized power from the aristocracy in their respective countries and consolidated that power in the monarchy. It was Louis XIV who formed the world's first professional police force, which he then used to intimidate and harass both the citizenry and the aristocracy of France. Within a century, the people of France would revolt against the monarchy and his enforcers, sending the king, the nobles, and many members of the Paris police force to be beheaded by guillotine during the French Revolution's reign of terror. The English Declaration of Rights listed a series of infractions committed by King James II in much the same way that the American Declaration of Independence listed infractions of King George III. It then went on to list 13 clauses that limited the powers of the monarchy, in much the same way that the American Bill of Rights limited the powers of the state. By this time, America's great political philosophers had already weighed in on the subject of a standing army or police. On one side, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, the respective authors of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And on the other side, Alexander Hamilton and John Jay. Yet despite their political differences, all expressed grave doubts and issued warnings of the danger that standing armies represent to our freedoms. So what is a standing army? One definition would be any army standing around waiting for war, and not fully occupied in a shooting war, defending the liberties our government was established to protect. Local law enforcement in America at this time is the very definition of a standing army. In Federalist Paper No. 8, Alexander Hamilton said, quote, "The continual necessity for their services enhances the importance of the soldier and proportionably degrades the condition of the citizen. The military state becomes elevated above the civil. The inhabitants of the territories, often the theater of war, are unavoidably subjected to frequent infringements on their rights, which serve to weaken the sense of those rights, and by degrees the people are brought to consider the soldiery not only as their protectors, but as their superiors. The transition from this disposition to that of considering them masters is neither remote nor difficult. But it is very difficult to prevail upon a people under such impressions, to make a bold or effectual resistance to usurpations supported by military power. All one need do is replace the word military with the word police in Hamilton's quote to see clearly the dangers that our founders warned us so vociferously against. In this passage, Hamilton is exhorting the American people to never accept a standing army in their midst, as that can only degrade our rights and the value we place on those rights, while also subjecting us to state-sanctioned violence, and that with time the people will meekly accept the loss of their natural and inalienable rights, now made slaves to our new masters, the standing army in our midst that we now call the police. And despite having this displayed in all of its obviousness, the people can no longer conceive of a way to resist the power of that standing army. Welcome to the police state of not America. The America that was founded on the principles enumerated in the Virginia Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Declaration of Independence is no more. These were the ideals upon which our founders established the United States and which gave life to the greatest political achievement in the history of man. And all of their achievements have been undone by our own neighbors and fellow Americans, acting in the capacity that our founders warned us against. The war on drugs is merely an excuse for the occupation of America by a standing army that is fighting and killing American citizens in a war on our own soil. A war that has dragged on for nearly a century with the prohibition of alcohol. A war that has been financed by another institution our founders feared even more than this standing army: a central bank. My name is Greg Jeffers. Please stay with me as I continue to examine the history of the police, their evolution of rampant militarization, and their conversion into a standing army occupying what was once the land of the free, the United States of America.